Welcome to another explainer. Okay, let's dive right into this. If you look at a map of the world, there's always that massive blank white space sitting at the very bottom, Antarctica. But it's not just a giant block of ice. It is, no joke, a massive unfolding geopolitical mystery, an actual ticking time bomb hidden beneath the ice of our seventh continent. Today we're going to unpack exactly who controls this frozen land and why its fate matters more right now than ever before.
To really get why the politics here are so high stakes, we kind of have to wrap our heads around the place itself. Antarctica is a total anomaly. We're talking about the only continent on Earth with zero government, no country status, and literally no indigenous tribes living there. And the climate? It is downright alien. Temperatures can drop to a mind-boggling -89 degrees Celsius.
But wait, it's not just the bone-chilling cold that makes it hostile. It is officially the windiest place on the planet. We're talking blinding snowstorms whipping across the ice at unbelievable speeds of up to 300 kilometers per hour. To put that in perspective, if you were to step outside during one of these whiteouts, it would literally blind you.
And here's the craziest part, right? Even though it holds the vast majority of the entire world's fresh water locked up in all that ice, Antarctica is technically the world's driest desert. It gets a mere 51 millimeters of precipitation a year. That's practically nothing. Even when it does quote-unquote rain, it just turns into snow way before it ever hits the ground.
Section 1. The Frozen Desert.
Section 2. The Great Ice Rush. You'd think because of these incredibly hostile, life-threatening conditions, the place would just be a blank canvas, left totally alone. But the deep irony here is that humanity has been absolutely obsessed with claiming this pristine land for centuries. Let's move through the timeline here to see how this builds, because it's actually wild. The fascination started way back around 350 BC. The Greek philosopher Aristotle knew the Earth was spherical, so he theorized there had to be a southern landmass just to balance out the Arctic in the north. He called it Antarctos. Fast forward to 1530, and you've got a French map bravely sketching out a massive Terra Australis Incognita, the unknown southern land. By 1773, the British naval officer James Cook got super close. He spotted rock deposits on floating icebergs, but he basically declared the place just way too perilous for anyone to ever actually reach. And it wasn't until 1895 that a Norwegian ship finally made the very first undisputed human landing on its frozen shores.
And that 1895 landing, it immediately kicked off our first real taste of Antarctic drama. Picture this. A few crew members get into a tiny rowboat to head to the shore. A Norwegian guy named Karsten Borchgrevink claims he jumped out of the boat before it even hit land, just so he could be the very first. But then, a New Zealander named Alexander claims no, he stepped out first, ostensibly just to keep the boat steady. They argued fiercely over who actually touched the ice first. There are even these hilarious historical sketches showing Alexander trying to sneak out of the boat past his completely bewildered crewmates. It's just this perfectly human, ego-driven snapshot of rushing to claim the unknown.
Well, that funny little race to be first very quickly morphed into a massive, formal land grab during what's known as Antarctica's colonial period. Between 1908 and 1942, 7 different countries formally claimed sovereignty over giant slices of the continent. The pie was just aggressively carved up. Australia alone laid claim to an incredible 42% of the whole continent. Other slices went to France, Norway, and New Zealand, but as you might guess, not everyone agreed on where those borders should actually be.
And mapping it all out brilliantly illustrates the growing geopolitical tension that followed. On one side, you have nations like Norway, Australia, France, and New Zealand. Their claimed territories are neatly demarcated, they do not overlap at all, and they formally recognize each other's claims. Easy, right? But on the other side, things get very, very messy. Chile, the United Kingdom, and Argentina carved out fiercely overlapping territories. Actually, Chile's claim fully swallows up both the British and Argentinian claims. And to enforce these messy borders, these countries started plopping down permanent research stations right on top of each other, which were essentially functioning as intelligence bases.
Section 3. A Fragile Truce. So by the mid-20th century, the Cold War is in full swing, and the global fear was that the US and the Soviet Union were going to turn this untouched ice into a literal battleground. In 1950, the Soviet Union actually issued a memorandum threatening that they wouldn't recognize any territorial claims unless they were actively participating in the process. Yikes. Enter the Antarctic Treaty.
Pushed by U.S. President Eisenhower to basically prevent a frozen war, a big conference went down in Washington, and on December 1st, 1959, this groundbreaking treaty was signed. It laid down 3 vital rules. First, Antarctica is for peaceful purposes only, absolutely no military basis. Second, free and open scientific investigation for everyone. And third, all scientific results have to be freely exchanged. It legally guaranteed that the continent would stay a peaceful zone for international collaboration. So the really crucial point here is that the treaty didn't actually cancel those messy, overlapping claims we just talked about. The 12 original governments who signed it didn't give up their territories at all. The treaty really just hit the pause button on a ticking clock. To this very day, those 7 countries still legally hold on to their claims, even though the United States and most of the rest of the world completely refuse to recognize them. It's essentially a massive symbolic standoff, totally frozen in time.
Section 4. India's Secret Expedition.
Now, this is a fascinating wildcard. Initially, India was totally against the Antarctic Treaty. They felt it was basically an exclusive, private club, and that the whole peaceful scientific use thing was just a really convenient cover story for these countries to eventually start mining. When India tried to get the UN to just take control of the whole continent and failed, they decided to take matters into their own hands. In December 1981, this renowned marine biologist, Dr. Saeed Zahur Qasim, led a highly secretive expedition. They borrowed a Norwegian icebreaker called the Polar Circle and just sailed south. And since India wasn't part of the treaty, this was technically an illegal expedition. When they successfully landed, it completely shocked the global community. The New Scientist magazine even ran a headline joking, "Indians quietly invade Antarctica."
But, that really bold move paid off. Not long after, India officially signed the treaty and set up their own active research stations. And the science that came out of it was huge. Take Indian scientist Sudipta Sengupta, for example. She did this groundbreaking research in the Shirmashire Hills on the Antarctic coast. Her work actually proved that these hills were part of a fault line that was once directly connected to the Indian subcontinent. This was way back before India broke off, drifted north, and smashed into Tibet to create the Himalayas. It's just this absolutely incredible geological connection, spanning millions of years, proving exactly why global scientific access there is so important.
Section 5. The ticking clock.
And that brings us right to the present day, and honestly, to the whole crux of this explainer. While the science has been thriving for decades, there's this massive geopolitical crisis looming just over the horizon. The stakes hidden beneath all that ice are astronomical, and the world is getting a lot hungrier for what Antarctica might be hiding. To really get the threat, we have to look at the Madrid Protocol, signed in 1991. This environmental protection agreement added a really critical layer to the original treaty by placing strict, definitive bans on all drilling and mining activities. So right now, it shields the continent from oil-hungry scavengers looking to exploit resources under the guise of exploration. But this environmental shield might only be temporary.
Now, what's really interesting here is a staggering number, 19 billion. Why are countries so desperate to eventually drill down there? Well, back in 1992, experts from the U.S. Geological Survey estimated that there are at least 19 billion barrels of recoverable oil trapped right beneath the Antarctic ice. That is a massive, highly lucrative reserve just sitting there, completely untouched.
But hold on, it gets even crazier. Mineral explorers in Russia have made these absolute jaw-dropping claims that there could actually be up to 500 billion barrels of oil and gas waiting down there. 500 billion. With mind-boggling numbers like that, the financial incentive for nations to just tear up the Madrid Protocol and start drilling is, well, it's astronomical.
And because of that, countries are already playing the long game. They're finding these modern loopholes to exert soft power and quietly maintain their claims. For example, China is the only country to exclusively build new research stations since the year 2000, strategically expanding their physical footprint. Meanwhile, nations like Britain, Chile, and Argentina run tourist outposts. You can literally go visit the British station at Port Lockroy just to get an official passport stamp. I mean, it sounds like a fun, quirky tourist gimmick, right? But geopolitically, it's a highly calculated way for these countries to softly express sovereignty and keep a permanent physical presence on the ground.
And there are 2 massive factors rapidly accelerating all of this tension: melting ice and new technologies. Historically, trying to mine in Antarctica was just way too expensive and dangerous to ever be viable. But as climate change brutally melts the ice shelves, the continent is suddenly becoming a lot easier to access.
When you combine that easier physical access with cheaper, way more advanced extraction tech, suddenly the natural and economic barriers that protected Antarctica for millions of years are washing away.
Which leads us directly to the ultimate ticking time bomb, the Antarctic Treaty, and the agreements that are currently holding these nations back from carving up the continent are set to expire in the year 2048. That's really not that far away. In just a few decades, all of these legally suspended territorial claims, all that potential oil, and all this bubbling geopolitical tension could suddenly be completely unfrozen. The world is going to have to make a choice: renew the treaty or let the global scramble begin.
So I want to leave you with this question to really chew on. What should be Antarctica's future? Should we continue to fiercely protect our seventh continent, leaving it purely for scientific collaboration and environmental preservation? Or, as global resources start to dwindle everywhere else, should we open it up? Should we explore and extract what lies beneath the ice? The clock is ticking toward 2048, and the fate of this frozen world is entirely up to us. Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer, and I'll catch you next time.